Tony Soprano didn't just hate a painting. He hated what it did to him, how it froze his contradictions into a single image he couldn't argue with. A boss who wants to be both feared and forgiven cannot afford to be seen too clearly. Paintings see clearly. Photographs steal a moment. Paintings interpret a soul. That's why the Paulie portrait, and especially its second life on Paulie's wall, gnawed at Tony like a quiet accusation. It didn't just remember a horse. It remembered the parts of Tony he spends the entire series trying to keep compartmentalized: his guilt, his hunger for love, his taste for control, and his fear that the story of his life is slipping away from him. Start with the simplest layer. Tony loved that horse. For a man who lives by leverage, Paulie offered an honest exchange: care in, affection out. No angles. No kickbacks. Watching that horse run made him feel like a better version of himself, protective, generous, almost innocent. When the portrait first appears, Tony tolerates it as a sentimental token, even flirts with the idea of pride. Look at me and my champion. But after Paulie dies, the picture curdles. It stops being a keepsake and becomes a witness. Suddenly, the canvas isn't about triumph, it's about a failure of protection. Anyone else could shrug and say, it's a horse. Tony can't, because in his own private mythology, everything he protects that dies near him becomes a referendum on his leadership, his crew, his family, his animals. The portrait's eyes, hers and his, stare back with the wrong kind of memory. This is the first reason he hates it. The painting collapses the space Tony needs to breathe. He survives by staging his life like a series of rooms with locked doors, husband here, father there, boss in another, victim elsewhere, predator in the last. The portrait knocks down some of those walls. It sits on the ledge and mutely says, these are all the same man. When he looks at himself beside Paulie, he sees the caretaker and the killer fused together. The man who could tear up over a sick horse, and the man who can order a beating without looking up from his eggs. That isn't just cognitive dissonance. It's exposure. How can you play angles when the angle is painted right in front of you? But there's a deeper reason, and it's uglier. The painting reveals Tony's hunger to be seen as noble without ever giving up the power to be feared. He loves to be called a stand-up guy, a good provider, the benevolent king in the neighborhood. The portrait dares to make that subtext literal. It frames him as protector, champion, even fatherly deity to a creature that trusts him. And at first that might seem flattering. But the flattery contains a trap. If you are the protector in a picture, then everything the picture doesn't protect reflects on you. The horse dies. The stable burns. The myth fails. Who is responsible when the myth you curated betrays you? The painting doesn't shout the answer. It just hangs there and makes silence heavy. Tony listens to silence too closely. It gets in his head. There's also the matter of grief's etiquette. Tony belongs to a culture, and a specific subculture, where you don't mourn loudly. You deflect, you joke, you pour a drink, you go to work. The portrait turns grief into furniture. It makes mourning domestic, daily, inescapable. Imagine losing something you truly loved and then watching a canvas rehearse the loss every time you pass the room. Even people without blood on their hands would struggle. For Tony, grief is dangerous because it loosens his control. Feeling deeply leads to questioning, and questioning leads to the one cliff edge he avoids, whether the life he's built has any redemptive center at all. Why would he keep a doorway to that question hanging above a couch? And then Paulie enters the story, a man whose need to belong is louder than his ability to read a room. When Tony tosses the painting aside, Paulie retrieves it, hangs it in his home, and then has it altered so Tony is dressed like a general. That single decision concentrates everything Tony fears about being mythologized. It turns an already charged image into something close to a religious icon. The boss as a uniformed, heroic figure, chin up, chest out, no longer the man who loves a horse, but the man who commands a battlefield. It is meant, on Paulie's part, as tribute and insurance. Homage doubles as protection in their world. If I display the king won't strike me down. But for Tony, seeing himself mounted in guilt and fantasy breaches the boundary he spends the whole series policing. The difference between being a leader and being worshipped like a saint. Why would worship bother a man who craves respect? Because worship creates expectations he cannot meet without cracking. If you are a general in the frame, you are responsible for victory and honor. Those are absolutes. Real life, Tony's life, is all trade-offs and sins he tallies in silence. The general cannot be weak. The general cannot be guilty. So the general must be a lie. And Tony, for all his evasions, hates lies that trap rather than liberate. The retouched painting transforms his private self-mythology into a rigid public myth. Tony the commander, Tony the protector. He knows he is not that, not consistently. The uniform becomes a weight. There's another angle, not just psychology, but politics. In a crew where symbols matter, images can be weapons. The portrait on Paulie's wall communicates a narrative: my boss is my standard. It would be one thing if Tony had sanctioned it. He didn't. The fact that Paulie rescued the canvas, edited it, and displayed it without permission is a kind of appropriation of the boss's image. Tony's authority rests in no small part on managing how he appears to his men: approachable but untouchable, human but beyond judgment, close but finally distant. Paulie's version of the painting hijacks that calibration. It rebrands the boss without the boss's consent. Tony is sensitive to that. He has an instinct for how small rituals become large precedents. If Paulie can frame Tony like a saint today, tomorrow someone else can invoke that saint to shame him. The general wouldn't have handled it that way. Subtle? Yes. But men like Tony think in these subtleties because they've watched empires fall from them. So when Tony walks into Paulie's place and sees the modified portrait, Tony as a uniformed, almost Napoleonic figure, what does he feel? Start with the flash of anger that's easier to show. It's the righteous kind that comes when you feel someone has taken a private thing and made it public. Paulie thinks he's honoring the boss. Tony tastes theft. The horse wasn't just an investment, so she was a portal to a softer part of Tony that he keeps under lock and key. Paulie, without meaning to, steals the key and hangs it by the door. That's what Tony reads first: violation. Right behind anger comes embarrassment. Tony's not embarrassed by loving the horse. He's embarrassed by how this canvas makes that love look theatrical. He senses kitsch, and kitsch degrades feeling by making it loud and cheap. If you've ever had a real emotion repackaged as a souvenir, you know the feeling? Something true turned tacky. Seeing the general's uniform is even worse. Now his grief has been reissued as propaganda. The man who cried at the vet's office is suddenly the man in the parade. He didn't ask for a parade. He asked to be left alone with what he lost. But beneath anger and embarrassment is the real wound: dread. Images stick. Tony's mind, already a crowded house of icons, his mother's face, ducks lifting from a pool, a glowing TV, the faces of men he's had to bury, doesn't need another idol to feed at night. The General Tony in Paulie's frame feels like a new god that will demand sacrifices, perform more leadership, assert more control, prove you deserve the uniform. Dread arrives because he's tired of proving anything to anybody, tired of playing Messiah to a flock that both worships him and bleeds him dry. The painting makes him feel trapped inside his role, not elevated by it. And yet there's irony in the way Tony reacts. He circles the portrait like a man unsure whether to laugh or break it. That ambivalence tells us something important. He is drawn to the flattery even as he rejects it. Tony is not a monk. Part of him sees the general and thinks, that looks right. He loves control. He loves to be deferred to. The image scratches that itch, then immediately infects it. Because if he accepts the flattery, he accepts the burden of its lie. If he destroys it, he destroys the compliment. Which brings us to Tony's signature move whenever sentiment corners him: convert feeling into action. Don't argue with the symbol, erase it. Whether he orders Paulie to get rid of the painting or removes it himself, the logic is consistent. Purge the icon before it reshapes the room. Now, why did Paulie take the painting home in the first place? Because Paulie lives on borrowed significance. He collects stories, favors, tokens, saints. He tapes together his identity from objects that tell him who he is. The portrait offers him a shortcut to importance. If the boss is on my wall, then I am close to the boss. If the boss is a general, then I am the loyal soldier at his side. Paulie's revision of the painting isn't only hero worship, it's self-insertion. He is writing himself into the epic. That's sweet, even moving, if you forget where you are. You are in a world where proximity can get you punished. Paulie misunderstands the boundary between private homage and public staging. In Paulie's mind, the painting's a talisman, protection against the boss's unpredictable weather. In Tony's mind, it's a lightning rod. Paulie's misread also exposes a permanent friction in their relationship. Paulie wants Tony to be a kind of father who grants security in exchange for devotion. Tony wants to be a father who demands discretion above all. Devotion is noisy, look at my wall, while discretion is quiet, take that down and don't make me explain why. When Tony sees the painting in Paulie's place, he doesn't just see his own face, he sees that Paulie doesn't get him. And if a man that close doesn't get him, who does? That sting shows up in Tony's tone, the mix of scolding and warning. He isn't only angry, he's disappointed. Disappointment in this world is never safe. It tends to bloom into paranoia. If Paulie can misunderstand me this badly, what stories is he telling out there? Add to that Tony's superstition, another undercurrent the painting activates. He's not purely rational about omens. The horse dies, money gets messy. Friendships fray. A portrait outlives a creature. In that calculus, the image begins to feel like a totem of bad luck, the kind that clings. It's not that Tony believes a canvas can cause misfortune, it's that he knows objects can concentrate energy. He wants the energy dispersed. This is why, after insisting it be removed, he hardens, no halfway measures, no keeping it in a closet. Erase the conduit. Sever the memory from its shrine. Still, what truly seals Tony's hatred is that the painting tracks his own internal double bind. He wants to be loved like a gentle owner and obeyed like a ruthless commander. The original portrait shows the gentle owner. Paulie's alteration shows the ruthless commander. Seeing them superimposed collapses the safe fiction that he can be one in the morning and the other at night without remainder. If a single image can hold both truths, so can a single witness, Carmela, Meadow, AJ, Melfi, Silvio, even Paulie. The painting's very existence suggests a court of eyes holding a consistent idea of Tony, something he works day and night to prevent. He lies by keeping people in separate theaters. This canvas books them into the same show. There's another tonal detail easy to miss, class. Tony senses when something about him is being packaged for a taste level he distrusts. Fine art has always been a wedge in his world. He wants to belong among people who hang originals, but he resents their quiet condescension. The horse portrait, especially in its embellished form, walks a line between real art and sentimental fan art. Its existence whispers, you want culture? Here's your culture. Your face in a costume. Tony recognizes the put down even if nobody intends it. He hates being patronized more than he hates being opposed. So did Tony hate the painting from the jump? Not exactly. He hated what the painting became once the world, grief, guilt, Paulie's devotion, superstition, class insecurity, touched it. Objects in Tony's life never stay innocent. Either they become tools or they turn into threats. The pie on my portrait tried to be both, a tool for remembering he could be tender, and a threat reminding him tender men lose. That contradiction is intolerable for him. He resolves it the only way he knows, by choosing what serves power and discarding what jeopardizes it. Watch how he breathes around the canvas. With it near, he's short, barbed, deflecting, almost pleading without words. Take it away. Without it, he expands again into the role that shields him, practical, decisive, above it all. The painting's removal is not a victory over sentiment. It's a truce with it. He doesn't become less sad about the horse. He just no longer has to audition his sadness in front of witnesses. In Tony's world, the only safe feelings are the ones nobody can prove you had. Now picture the moment he spots the altered portrait on Paulie's wall, the general's braid, the proud posture, the horse gazing with that obedient softness. What does he feel? A crackle of recognition. This is how they want to see me. A surge of flattery. Maybe I deserve it. A clash of revulsion. This is a lie that could own me. And then, at last, the cool decision that looks like cruelty but for him is survival. Shut it down. Tell Paulie to take it down. Neutralize the shrine. What reads as anger at a painting is really a strategy for not letting other people write his legend. In Tony's math, every legend becomes leverage in someone else's hands. All of that loops back to the plainest answer. Tony hates the painting because it forces him to choose. It asks him whether he is the man who wept for a dying animal or the man who commands men to do violent things, a choice he refuses to make even inside his own head. The portrait, original and revised, is a choice painted in oil. He opts out by destroying the question. Does that make him small? In one sense, yes, art could have been a path to integration, a way to accept himself whole. But Tony doesn't integrate. He compartmentalizes. Integration feels like surrender to him. The painting argues for a version of Tony that could someday confess. He hates confession. And Paulie? Tony's feelings about Paulie owning the portrait are complicated, but the headline is distrust layered over affection. He understands the gesture as a tangle of loyalty and neediness. He could even be moved for a blink. Here is a soldier who loves his general, who wants to see him exalted. But the blink passes. Tony has lived too long to ignore how easily exaltation turns into entitlement, how today's halo becomes tomorrow's moral claim. If Paulie has the Saint of Tony in the house, then Paulie has a story he can tell himself about Tony whenever Tony disappoints him. That is power Tony cannot delegate. In the end, The painting saga isn't small at all. It's a miniature of the show's whole argument about Tony, that every attempt to fix him into a single image, loving dad, loyal friend, ruthless boss, tragic anti-hero, will either cheapen him or con him. The only image he trusts is the one he edits in real time, moment by moment, with nobody holding the frame but him. A painting is a frame he can't hold. It hangs there after you leave the room. It speaks when you're not around to qualify it. Of course, he hates it. So when you ask why Tony Soprano hated the painting made for him, you're really asking what kind of man cannot bear to be pinned down by a single story. The answer is, a man who knows that once a story about him hardens, someone else can use it. The portrait of Tony and Paulie and the uniformed version in Paulie's apartment pressed too close to a story Tony couldn't let circulate, that he wants to be good, that he isn't, and that he knows it. He'll live with that knowledge in private. He won't let a canvas put it on the wall. And what did he feel when he saw it in Paulie's home? All the sensations he allows in microdoses, pride, shame, tenderness, fear, arriving at once, louder than usual because another man curated them. A flare of anger to clear the air. A steel-edged resolve to reassert authorship of his own myth. Beneath it, a flash of grief for the horse and for himself, because even kings are haunted by the pictures they can't unsee. He'll keep his crown, he'll smash the frame. That's Tony, choosing power over the portrait that might have made him honest.